I'm sure that whistleblowers is not a popular topic of any news interest or anything like that right now. But is in spite of I think Dana sent me an email that said, this has been the most chaotic week of my professional career, since her expertise is legal protections for whistleblowers. She is here to talk more about scientists and health professionals as whistleblowers, and in a particular case involving migrant children in detention, another important topic on the news. So thank you.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. I love you guys. I love scientists. I love science whistleblowers, and this is such. It's really an honor for me to get to present this case study because I've lived this so closely and really personally for the past, since really, I guess, in the trenches since June of 2018. Let me tell you a little bit about my organization because I think it'll help understand the methodology that I'm about to present around the case study. So we were founded in 1977, and we protect the public interest by promoting government and corporate accountability through litigating whistleblower cases, publicizing their disclosures, and developing legal reforms. So I like to say that the two reasons employees tend to stay silent in the face of misconduct is fear of reprisal and fear of futility, that nothing will happen if they speak up. And so we try to address both of those. So to the extent that we can protect someone who wants advice before blowing the whistle or reporting a problem, or more often they come to us after to represent them to the extent that they need to seek justice for suffering retaliation, which is unfortunately not the thank you response that we would like to see whistleblowers receive from raising a concern. But then we also try to make a difference with their information. So that makes us different than a regular law firm. So we protect people's employment rights, use other legal tools to make a difference, but then we also use different strategies of making sure that we're leveraging their information by working with public interest organizations, by working with professional associations, by working with Congress, and by working with the press. So it's, because the reason whistleblowers speak out is because they see a problem. So it wouldn't be responsive if we were just addressing the first issue. But of course, to address the first issue of protecting them from reprisal, it necessarily informs the strategies we use to make a difference, if that makes sense. So just to contextualize this, I mean, I think most people know the story of our most recent history, but if you recall, it was like in mid-May 2018, the zero tolerance policy was officially, 2018, that the zero tolerance policy for immigration was kind of handed down, and we started seeing reports of the decision to separate children from their parents at the border. And I remember being at a director's meeting. So we have a bunch of different program areas. We do work a lot with climate science whistleblowers. We work with nuclear whistleblowers. We work with food safety doctors and veterinarians and experts there. But we didn't really have an immigration program. So this whole administration has really caused different issues to come to the fore. But we were at a director's meeting internally, and I was about to kind of report on what I was doing. But I'm like, I want to know what we're doing about the babies, because we have something that we can offer here. So just purely as a mom, right, and as a human, seeing what was happening and seeing that we needed to respond. And so everybody completely agreed. So we and I just wanted to point out that, as that period was happening and there was increasing mobilization in civil society and that was pressuring Congress, a lot of that early rage around separation was in part fueled. I mean, everybody remembers the New York Times picture of seeing the girl crying, right? But the other two big things that I think happened were, we didn't represent these people, but Antar Davidson was a Southwest Key employee, and he went on Democracy Now! To talk about the no hugging policy that they were implementing in the cages with the kids. So the brothers couldn't even console themselves, and he quit because he could not enforce that policy. And then really the same day, this was like June 18th, I think, ProPublica dropped the audio tape of the kids crying for their parents, and it was just incredibly wrenching. Mass protests happened. Like within 3 days, the administration reversed, but allegedly reversed, right, the separation policy. And mass protests were still happening out of the outrage of the separation that were happening. So mass protests were happening. So it was really the power of whistleblowers and information that was really catalyzing this fuel, I think, for outrage and consciousness to affect change. And it really did. We placed an op-ed in the Houston Chronicle about the rights of employees to refuse to obey illegal orders. And we were approached, so this was like in June, around this time. And then we were approached by Dr. Scott Allen and his colleague, Dr. Pam McPherson. They were referred to us by Physicians for Human Rights, who Dr. Scott Allen, here, I'll move this now. So Dr. Scott Allen is a longtime member of Physicians for Human Rights, had worked with them kind of challenging the torture policy back in it. So he'd kind of gone through exercising his ethical duty as a doctor to speak out in the past. Now for Pam, Dr. McPherson, this was like her first rodeo. But they contacted us really wanting to know, they have non-disclosure agreements. So let me actually explain who they are. They are currently still DHS's, Department of Homeland Security's Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties subject matter experts, medical and mental health subject matter experts. So they are the subject matter experts for civil rights and civil liberties that go in and do investigations of the family residential centers that were the primary places that house families together. They came to us out of concern that with the retraction of the separation policy, the administration's response was, now we're just going to detain families together. And so there's going to be a ramp up, an expansion of detention. And they were like, yeah, separation's bad, but we cannot dismiss the harms posed by detention, which are very real. And so they had been doing investigations, including under the Obama administration, of the 4 different facilities, Dilley, Carnes, Berks, and Artesia. They actually got the Artesia facility closed because it was really inadequate to protect the health of children. So they had been raising concerns internally about the harms posed by detention and the inadequacies of these family residential centers, or FRCs, or really detention centers, to provide care to protect the kids. But they felt like they were able to make a difference. And as a matter of fact, at the end of the Obama administration, the policy edict from ICE and DHS was to really only in the most limited of circumstances allow kids to be in detention. So there was really a movement away from detention. So when they came forward to us, because they're like, we can't make a difference anymore, and we see imminent harm is going to happen from this ramp up of detention, because all these problems that we have been identifying, they have been identifying things like inadequate staffing of doctors, unqualified doctors, inadequate language translators, so you can't even figure out assessments. They had seen things like someone had implemented a vaccine program for the kids using adult levels of vaccines. They had seen kids having their fingers broken and crushed in doors because they had been converted maximum security prisons. They'd seen things like the failure to diagnose a baby who had lost a third of her body weight. It's one of the most basic things in terms of an indicator of malnutrition. They had missed it despite multiple cries and visits from the doctor. So they're like, there's no way, the kids are gonna die, essentially. So this is even way before. So this is like June, July, early July 2018. And so we said to them, so they had non-disclosure agreements, and they were concerned about what would happen to them if they spoke out. So they wanted to write an op-ed. That was kind of their plan. They wanted our advice, so whether or not that would violate the non-disclosure agreement. And we said, well, your First Amendment rights are not your strongest rights you have. You actually have very strong rights as federal contractors to blow the whistle, and non-disclosure agreements are never supersede your whistleblower rights, but you have to exercise them in a very careful way. So the question is, do you want to make a statement or do you want to make a difference? And if you want to make a difference, you need to do it a different way, and also probably a more protected way. But we really explained to them their rights and their risks and their options, and of course they were nervous, but we thought we could actually be more effective by having them make a more substantial disclosure by filing something with, by filing basically a complaint or a statement, first with the Department of Homeland Security, then with the Inspector General, and then to Congress, which are enumerate entities to whom federal contractors can make disclosures free from reprisal. So we made sure that we didn't have them talk to the press, but they were game and on board. And so so this is the first letter that we sent to Congress. These are the chairs of the Senate Whistleblower Caucus. It went, of course, to far more Congress people than this. It went to many House members and Senate members. And then, of course, the New York Times found out about it, but not from the doctors, somehow from Ron Wyden's office. So this got a lot of traction pretty quickly. So this was released very soon. And the minute, as we were working on the background of developing these statements, working with the whistleblowers about their concerns and how to execute this strategy, once we had this out, we then started working with the professional associations because, these are, Dr. Allen and Dr. McPherson are highly respected as experts within their community, and the professional associations really mattered so much to have their backs. So we quickly worked with the advocacy lead at the American College of Physicians, Bob Doherty, who is fantastic, and he really helped galvanize individual associations to write letters to Congress in support of the doctors. And then we received this letter. This happened in literally a week later. 14 medical associations, including some big ones, the American Association of Pediatrics, the AMA. I mean, very quickly mobilized to write a joint letter supporting the doctors. They sent this to the House and the Senate, several oversight committees, and basically, saying the troubling observations described in the doctor's report show possible medical neglect and child endangerment and merit congressional inquiry and oversight. We urge you to hold hearings to investigate the current situation facing migrant children and families as soon as possible. And this was so helpful to be able to then build on the case for the doctors, that it's not just these crank doctors, it's that they have the weight of the entire medical association legitimizing their disclosures as well as the importance of their exercising of their right to blow the whistle. And this meant so much to the doctors to have this support emotionally at a time when they were quite scared, right, that they might lose their contracts, or, Dr. Allen lives in Riverside, California, and he runs his own clinic in addition to doing the contract work for CRCL. But Pam lives in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is a slightly more conservative part of the country, and was a little bit, kind of nervous about, what the reaction would be. And so having the backing of the medical community was so emotionally and professionally important for them, and certainly for us as their advocates to be able to say, and their disclosures were supported by 14 medical associations, and to list them. Soon after this happened, then we started doing congressional briefings and doing things like submitting written testimony for Congress and submitting, offering some questions. What was helpful about the doctor's disclosures is that during some of the congressional hearings, they were able to ask the DHS people, have you read the doctor's disclosures? Are you aware of them? Or have you read any of the other, their reports that they've submitted over years about harms to children in detention, as well as the heavily cited disclosure we had said about proving the harm, asserting the overwhelming research that detention causes harm. And basically, we were able to get on the record through that working with Congress that they were very clear that they are intentionally using detention to deter migration, right? So that was another piece of the puzzle to be able to kind of get momentum. At the same time, as we were working with the medical associations, we also connected with the public interest community. So we're part of a coalition called Open the Government, which is a coalition organization of transparency organizations, but also other justice organizations. And they said, hey, would you like us to organize a meeting with a bunch of immigration justice groups? Because remember, the issue is, I know nothing about immigration. I mean, I know a lot more now than I did a year ago, but I was just like a mom who was like, oh my freaking God, we need to do something about this. And I know how to represent whistleblowers and how to turn their information into power, but I really don't know much about immigration. And it wasn't like we wanted to claim that space of people who are experts, who are long-term advocates, but boy, do we want to make sure that they had this information that they could leverage and add to their advocacy campaigns. And that way they could also educate us about where opportunities were. So it became this, and they can then send us whistleblowers, because they're meeting people. Whistleblowers don't self-identify as whistleblowers. They see themselves themselves as problems, as employees who see problems, and then they usually will go, usually they raise issues internally first. 95% of them say something internally first. But then they'll go to a public interest organization or a professional association who works on the issue that they're raising a concern about, because they won't go to a whistleblower organization unless they've been referred there, some way. So being able to educate public interest organizations about how to work effectively with whistleblowers is part of our mission. And actually, there's some guides out there that we've written about for public interest organizations about how to work with whistleblowers, as well as some guides for science employees as well. So you can take those, they're on some table in the back. So we built these relationships over time with these immigration justice organizations who were so grateful to be able to have this oxygen, this added fuel to their campaigns. One great example, let me see. So one great example was when DHS tried to initiate rulemaking petition to void the Flores settlement agreement that has limitations on the amount of time children have to be, can stay in detention. DHS and successfully actually avoided that. Of course, now that's being litigated. But the doctors wrote written statements about that, and then their testimony were cited by over 80 other organizations and people submitting comments. So it was very useful, as a frame and an anchor for people opposing getting rid of the Flores settlement standards. Of course, as we saw this happening, I like to say that in any other administration, we would have shut down child detention at this point. But that is not how this administration has been working, obviously. So we saw that when they were very consciously I actually think knowingly endangering children, right, to promote policy ends, the doctors decided to elevate their concerns publicly, which was a bigger step for them. It's not necessarily protected to go to the media at this point, but because we were going to limit their disclosures to what they had already said to Congress in public forums through protected entities, we had felt like we had pretty well insulated them in terms of wrapping them in their rights to make disclosures. We frame them as whistleblowers. They're engaging in protected activity. The scope of their disclosures is already in the public record, but we just put a human face to this. So this was their first outing. This was Thanksgiving weekend, the most highly watched weekend in the country on 60 Minutes. And this was, in August, Marie Juarez died. She was a kid who died within weeks after being released from Dilley, one of the facilities that they had raised concerns about. So, and that was part of this segment. It was incredibly moving, and really, then they went on NPR, and then they were asked by Senator Merkley, organized a congressional delegation along with Senator Hirono and two others to go down to the border and asked the doctors to go with them to help them know what to look for at the border. And so I think this more public posture really helped elevate Congress's role in taking a more aggressive stance on doing these investigations and looking at the harms posed by detention. So, and another thing that was very cool, so then they wrote this, the day of the Codel down to the border, the first kid died in U.S. custody. This was at the border facilities, which is, of course, where we've seen all these problems, happening so dramatically, which are, of course, even less equipped to deal with kids in detention than the longer-term family residential centers. But essentially the point is that these doctors have been warning about this. They've been warning about this since June 2018. So this partnership with the professional associations really helped, and the public interest organizations really helped lighten the load on the doctors. Like, they laid a foundation that then these other organizations could start championing. So it wasn't us having to push the river all the time. Colleen, she's the interim, most recent president of the American Association of Pediatrics. She became a very outspoken person on the harms posed by detention and was able to take, the lead on that. We worked very closely with Physicians for Human Rights on taking the lead on the expertise, so we could also retain Dr. Allen and Dr. McPherson as experts, because they're still they're still employed by CRCL as the subject matter experts. As a matter of fact, are going to, this next week, do their first investigations. No investigations have been happening at these facilities since September 2017. So they're about to go on they're very nervous, their first investigations next week. But the fact that they have not suffered reprisal, that they have been insulated is it's such a great story, right, about how you can do this right and really protect people and leverage their information effectively. One other example of how their disclosures made a difference were their original congressional testimony was cited in, oh, that's weird, that didn't work. Well, this is a complaint letter. That didn't work in the Google Drive transfer. Anyway, they filed a complaint citing the doctor's disclosures as an exhibit. Basically, when they had found out, you're like looking at this gibberish, that basically there were several infants under 1 being held at the family residential centers, which is totally illegal. And so they were able to make those disclosures by supporting that, and because of that, those kids were released, which then catalyzed us to be able to write another letter to Congress saying that you're actually supposed to not have kids under 2. Why aren't you doing inspections? And kind of raise that concern about the failures of CRCL as well as the Inspector General to make a difference. These doctors have been really supported and honored for their disclosures, and which is again another heartening thing. They were honored with the Ridenour Prize for Truthtelling this past year. That's also Scott Schuchart. He was with CRCL and blew the whistle on their efforts to stop the separation policy as illegal before it was implemented. And then Physicians for Human Rights honored them this past year at their annual gala. It makes a huge difference when we valorize and support whistleblowing and their disclosures, and when the professional communities particularly lend their voices of support to both the act of conscience and speaking up as well as the substance of the disclosures. It really amplifies the power of a brave truth teller to speak up and say what some of us aren't really they're in the best position to make a difference, right? So we want them to be able to speak up, but we also need to know that they're going to be suffering risk. And if we want to make sure that they're empowered and their information makes a difference, that support really, really matters. And we're seeing that now, right? Like I don't have to, that's a whole nother talk, right? But whistleblowing is being understood in a different way right now, and it's super exciting because it's an uphill battle to talk in a favorable way about whistleblowing. But these doctors really are, they are the best of what we want. This is who you want in government doing this work, right? And I think the fact that they've been high profile and protected has caused other people to come forward. Ellen Gallagher is another CRCL whistleblower. She's now at the DHS-IG's office, actually. But she's raised concern about ICE's widespread use of solitary confinement across all of their facilities. So it's adult detention, but it's another degree of harm. So she actually had blown the whistle even significantly for years before even coming to us, and had done a really phenomenal job. So we just have helped boost her and work on making better connections with Congress and with the press, and she's gotten a lot of traction for her work. So it's sometimes hard for me to accept that with all of this, the power of this information and galvanized attention on the harms posed by detention, that essentially that resurfaced again when everybody finally got what the doctors had been saying a year prior. This summer, we all saw what was happening at those camps at the border, right, at the CPB facilities. And it's amazing to me that detention is still happening. But we're in strange times, but boy, we need whistleblowers more than ever. And I don't think I need to make that case too clearly, but hopefully, this is another example, besides what's in the news right now, of how on one of the most important human rights issues you can think of, migration, the rights to seek asylum here, how we treat people in the most, inhumane ways. This is an incredible time in our history. It's really a scar, I think, on our country. These people are willing to speak up, and the fact that they've had the support of the professional associations, the public interest community, and in Congress, of course, the press and the public has been, it's why they keep speaking up. So that's, again, there are resources in the back on your way out. I'm available, and I'm happy to take any questions. I know we have a short session, so. I don't know if we have, do you have a question? Great.
I'll ask a quick question. So I'm originally from Australia, where I think it's probably fair to say we have an even more blotted history in dealing with asylum seekers than the United States. And I was wondering if by any chance you've been in contact with professionals there on the medical side or otherwise, helping them think through strategies that have been effective here that might be effective there?
No. I would say that doesn't mean that that's not it is, that's so interesting, and would be happy to explore that. I have to say, it has been, we are drinking from a fire hose, like on a regular basis, is this administration. And so I would say that the fact that we've been able to insulate the doctors and make the connections that we have is in some ways quite miraculous as it is. So the idea of expanding the borders is just probably outside of our current bandwidth, honestly. But I think that it is the methodology, as well as the role whistleblowers can play across any issue, or certainly across other countries and regions. The EU just passed the most aggressive whistleblower protection law that exists, and now 22 countries have to implement it. I mean, this is a powerful tool, and being able to also export how to harness that information and to make those connections, right, to leverage the information to protect the individual is certainly, it's absolutely so important. So thanks for your question. Yeah.
So a follow-up question. Are you all looking at all at GEO and core civic and how to deal with whistleblowers? Because frankly, they are the largest incarcerator of immigrants today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're contractor-operated facilities, and so a lot of these family residential centers are run by GEO, actually, and Core Civic. And so, yes, especially with the solitary confinement issues at the adult facilities, particularly, it's a big problem. So I would say the answer is yes. We don't have any public whistleblowers at this point from those companies. So, yeah.
I heard you when you said you're at maximum capacity. but I have an idea. And maybe you're already doing this.
Yeah.
But it dawns on me, especially when looking at that center brochure, that perhaps there would be a role for scientific societies in sponsoring a webinar where you all would speak about the work that you do and the role of scientists as whistleblowers. And then we could send out that message through our networks of our scientists who are working in practice settings for those various different, in those various different disciplines. Maybe that would be something.
Oh, that is my job. Yes. So if any, and I was actually so honored to speak at the general AAAS conference last fall. But it's one of many. But I think a webinar directly focusing that could be sent out and captured, and I am 100%, 1,000% on board with that.
I'll talk later.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.